Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I am doing a review on The Big Book of Horrors. This is a 78-page PDF created by Cody Faulk with PB Publishing. This is a PDF that you can download now off of DriveThru RPG. You can get the watermarked PDF for $4.95. You can get the softcover premium book for $14.99. And currently on DriveThru RPG, there is a sale for this content where you can get both the PDF and the softcover book for $15.99. I will put links as to where you can find these things in the description, as well as some links to some additional content by both Cody Faulk and PB Publishing. This is a review copy that was sent to me by Cody Faulk, so I did not have to pay for this, but in correspondence with him through email, I did verify that what I am reviewing today, as far as the PDF goes, it is identical to what you will get on DriveThru RPG. I am going to run this through my review system of layout, design, and editing, art, and of course content. And at the end of it all, I hope to better inform you as to whether or not this might be something that's a good fit for you and your gaming group. Here we have The Big Book of Horrors by Cody Faulk and PB Publishing. What we're looking at is some horrific player options for the world's greatest role-playing game. I like that it immediately identifies in the bottom right that this is 5th edition compatible. So we're looking at options and we know what game and what system, or I should say what version this is going to work with. The front cover looks really good, the title stands out, everything is nice and readable. As we start to scroll through, I like the overall layout of the colors that are used, and then there's sort of that smoky, ghosted feeling that is kind of keeping it blank so that you can have a lot of room and space for all of the content, whether it's artwork or big bold font or the actual wording itself. But then it's sort of that fog of war, if you will, sort of dissipates, and you see a little more of the flourish on the outside on the border. So really cool piece of artwork here as well. As we get through and scrolling down further, we've got good credits page and references to all those that are involved, cover artists and whatnot. The table of contents is well laid out. It's immediately identifiable and readable. I can navigate through, and then also checking it through the sort of PDF navigation on Adobe Acrobat Reader. If I was to look at Paladin, which tells me it's on page 19, the minute I hit page 19, it does jump me to the Paladin. So navigation is spot on. I like the use of sort of this bold heading font that's up top here. It's very different from everything else, but yet there's still some good indications of sort of bold font to kind of draw our eye towards a certain section, and then you have good use of font throughout. So in 78 pages, there's good bits of artwork and other little bits and pieces here, but the bulk of the content we're looking at is written stuff, the written word. So first off, it's well worded, everything looks good, it's laid out quite well, the font use, the spacing, the leading, the kerning, all of the bits and pieces are really well done. I do like the column format because there's so much text, so as I talk about all the time, you don't have to kind of navigate your eye across the page too quickly. You can easily kind of fall within that column format. The only thing, maybe kind of a really small slight thing, is I would have used a little more of the margin space in both the left and the right and kind of move those columns to give it a little more separation in the middle between your column width is basically what it's called. Now, it still reads well and it looks laid out well because I believe this text is what's called justified. And what that means is it will create some little, the computer does the magic, right? Where it'll create some little spaces between words and letters in order to ensure that all words end at the exact same, and you can see, and that's why it's called justified. They end at the exact same point. Instead of kind of like, say this word balance didn't fit normally. If it doesn't fit within the column width, it would have moved it down. It would have returned it down to the next line. So because everything is justified, it still works despite having a really small column width, but I would have liked maybe just a little more space as far as that goes. I've read through this, all of it, and as far as the editing of it, there aren't any spelling errors that I find. There isn't any weird wording issues. Things are not overly verbose or obtuse, and it's easy to kind of read the description of what something's trying to say and get the gist of it very quickly. It isn't too wordy and lengthy in that regard. So it isn't just filling up 78 pages with sort of a rehash of saying the same thing or saying the same thing in multiple paragraphs where you could have said it within one sentence. So everything from an editing standpoint is really good. I would have liked to have seen, as I said, a little more separation in the middle. Also, there's a little bit here where we've got like these things here, right? And I know that this is bold and it's italicized, But one thing that happens and occurs is this is very familiar, where you have sort of the heading of what this thing is called, and then it's followed by a period, and then you have the details as to what it is, right? I would have liked to have seen just a slight bit more difference and variability, maybe in the font usage here, of just having this stand out a little more, so that I can immediately kind of what I call the squint test, where if I was to kind of squint my eyes and just focus in this section, I don't mishmash between age, knowing that that is a standalone thing as the heading of it, and then here's the information on it. So it's just a very minor thing, just as it is with the column width. And I'm just kind of nitpicking here, but that's kind of the point of this, right? It's so well done overall. I'm trying to see if there's any little bits here. For all of this, the way everything is laid out and where the artwork is put in and interjected, I have to give layout design and editing 2 out of 2 possible points. So next, let's take a look at art. And of course, we're going to start with the front cover. This screams to us, of course, and Cody mentioned this in email as well, with the upcoming Halloween coming up, the artwork. I mean, you've got jack-o'-lanterns, right? And you've got this kind of zombie hand coming out of whether that is some sort of Photoshop manipulated work, that's incredible artwork here. It looks really good. You've got enough of I feel like it's a little bit much on sort of that red drop shadow, but it does allow the title to kind of stand out, and the red kind of fits within that sort of blood moon, vampiric effect. So all in all, the front cover looks outstanding. Very, very well done. Let me see who this is. It is, I apologize, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that name, but really good cover art. The interior art is very, very well done. Some of this is by Dean Spencer, but otherwise, everything here is used with permission, and I'm sure there's got to be some relationship here between what content's allowable, through normal D&D license open gaming stuff. So you've got a really cool piece right here with this sort of vampiric skull. And then where you look at artwork, right, there's a few the introduction, you're just talking about something. You don't need a piece of art here, so it's nice, a nice breath of fresh air to see some cool art right there. And I mean, the art quality itself and the skill work in creating such art is top-notch. It's among the best I've seen. So I would have liked to have seen maybe the layout thrown around a little bit different, so that I can see this Dhampir, this one single new race, up front while I'm reading about its initial, points. But I do like that whenever it has a piece of artwork where it's really trying to shine, what it does is it will give you the information, and then there she is. That's what it would look like. And seeing that it's a full page spread of artwork, it's really cool. And obviously, skill-wise and quality level, it's top-notch. It's really, really good. There are some pieces where the artwork is kind of there within the column format or on the same page as the information, but you'll see this in a lot of cases where the artwork will fit and will be put after you read about a certain thing, and it's given a full page of treatment. So there's a nice, beautiful piece of artwork. As I said, the quality is outstanding. Here we have a Path of Eldritch Barbarian, and you have this is enough, because as you're reading it and you get that sort of what I like to say is the Warhammer Fantasy mutation aspect, which is the essence of this new subclass. That's a beautiful piece of artwork. It's well drawn, and it immediately speaks to me as to what it is that we're looking at. And the same goes for, here's the College of Dread for a Bard. There you have, again, a full page piece of artwork, so really well done. The pieces fit thematically. There's the Fear Domain Cleric. You have a Circle of Midnight Druid. There she is in that regard. There isn't a full page spread, but when you don't have a large piece like this, it's really cool that they add it right here within. The fighter, you have this little weapon here, but there she is, really, really cool. This monk looks amazing. It's a little bit larger than the druid one, but it's still, you would almost look like you're trying too hard to fill up a whole page spread. So here, they took advantage of the smaller size and interjected it within the columns, but it's really nice to read about this monk and that kind of bat-like quality and aspect to him, where he's taking sort of features that are given to the bat creature, and aesthetically this is what it looks like with the pointed toenails and kind of the tusks, and he looks like that, so it looks really good. There's the paladin. Here's a ranger, where you've got just a cool piece of artwork down here. You have a rogue, beautiful piece of artwork, full page spread. I like just the little details on the outside, besides just the female itself, but sort of sitting on the throne. Artistic skill set wise, I mean, these are things with perspective and different anatomical limitation, or requirements where you have to draw a thing sitting down. So the skill set within the artwork and those that created it is top notch. Very, very well done. You have the Warlock. You don't have artwork for the backgrounds necessarily. You have just a few little pieces of some cool things that you can kind of latch onto aesthetically. But where it is and where the art is and the quality of it, it's top notch. So just as I did for layout design and editing, for art, I've got to give this thing a perfect 3 out of 3. Let's talk about the meat and potatoes of it all, the content. So what are we looking at? We're looking at, as I said, a bunch of player options for 5th edition D&D. This is called the Big Book of Horrors, right? Within, quickly in the introduction, it says, this book contains, and reading right down here, 8 new character backgrounds, 1 new playable race, that was that Dhampir we talked about a little bit, and then you have 12 new subclasses, 1 for each of the core classes within the official player's handbook, right? And then at the back of the book, you've got some pre-generated characters that were already laid out for you using the options that are within. So if you want to use some of these options, but you don't want to invest the time and the energy into making new sort of subclasses within, you can use the stuff that's already here. Another really elegant thing, and I'll show it to you when we get to the back, is all those pre-generated characters were laid out on custom character sheets, and it gives you like 4 or 5 pages of blank character sheets that you can print out. If you just want to keep characters, maybe not even using this, but maybe use different characters for Curse of Strahd or something like that, any macabre or any darker Halloween-themed adventure. Regardless, as I said, of using anything within this book, you can just simply print out those character sheets and you're going to get a really cool vibe. So we'll look into those in just a little bit. So that's just a really nice touch that they gave you that extra bit of content. So with all of this that we're looking at, as I said, it gives you these 8 new backgrounds. Let's start with the new race. So they're really big on talking about in the introduction some elements that were taken from another big book series that they've, whether it's Cody, Faulk, and PB Publishing have created. And the other one is called the Big Book of Backgrounds. I may do a review on that, but we'll see how that goes. That was sent to me as well. But in the introduction of the Big Book of Backgrounds was sort of the first time that it mentions what's the reasoning behind why this content was created. And one big thing that they stand on, which I really, really like a lot, is it talks about how it tries to create options, but also keep those balanced, because they kind of go hand in hand. When you have options, it's nice for players, of course, right? And even for DMs, if I'm going to start tacking some of these options onto NPCs and just create some more food for thought. It's nice to have options, but you want to feel like the options have been kind of run through the ringer, as I say, or wrangled in, which is one of the benefits of official content, right? Because WotC has the resources to playtest these things ad nauseum. You want to feel like that those options are balanced well enough so that you don't feel like any option given is always going to be better than something that was previously offered. Or you don't want to feel like the option is a must-have or a must-take. And I think when you do that, people and players and everyone at your table learns to sort of trust those options, and they truly do feel like, hey, here's just some more things that we can use. We don't have to worry about wrangling it in and feeling like we're going to be stepping on someone else's toes or we're going to be completely overpowered and unbalanced. It just gives almost what I like to call sort of horizontal progression and just sideways options versus vertical things of this is clearly better than another and so on and so forth. So they seem to do a really good job in these big book options here, and obviously in this specific one of the Big Book of Horrors, of really adhering to that principle of providing a bunch of options here in these new backgrounds, which aren't inherently make or break things in a game anyway. It's very behind the scenes roleplay wise, but when you're creating new subclasses, you don't want to have something that immediately says, this is the most powerful subclass for fighters, everyone should take it, otherwise you're kind of gimping your character. And they've done a really good job of sort of wrangling in the power level of these things and created truly some options that you can look into, especially if you're playing within sort of this theme of kind of a little bit darker overall. So let's take a look at the Dhampir real quick. I'm not going to go over every little detail on everything here. The Dhampir is very, very well laid out. It's basically tacking on to human only, so you're getting some template stuff from humans, but you've got different, and it talks about it within this vampiric origin section. You have different ways in which, as you were birthed, so you are still alive. Yes, you have some vampiric qualities to you, but you're still alive. You still need to eat and sleep and breathe and whatnot. And you're not considered, the undead template. But there's elements that happen to your mother within their bloodline that you came out as sort of half vampire, basically. So it's a really cool new thing. And the other thing I like about it so much is that it gives you the things that might make sense, right? You have dark vision. You've got fangs, which you can use for like unarmed attacks. You have vampirism, where you can kind of, as you bite, you can kind of steal some temporary hit points, that type of stuff. But it also gives you sunlight sensitivity, which is pretty harsh. But within the variants, it offers something called walk in the light. I'm thinking Blade, the Daywalker concept, where this replaces sunlight sensitivity, because that can be a pretty harsh thing to actually wrangle in within a group setting and within a gameplay thing, right? Because you're kind of like confined in that you have disadvantage whenever your target or you are in sunlight. That's a huge thing. So this might be enough of a turnoff, but it offers these little variants where if you take the walk in the light thing, you basically can walk through daylight with no problems, no different than a normal human, but by removing that, you're also removing dark vision. So it has these little variants of ways of within the new race option itself, there's some different ways that you might be able to kind of mix and match a few different traits and powers. So that's really cool. As we get into, and a beautiful piece of artwork, as I said, so it immediately depicts what I'm looking at, where there's a vampiric quality to it, but you can also retract the fangs so you don't have that horrible issue. But it talks about it within the folklore and the ill omen and whatnot of how people perceive you and so on and so forth. So it does a really good, an entire page of giving you the details and the background and story and roleplay of it, and then it gives us the traits on the next page. So really cool. As far as subclasses, a lot of them feel there's some things that are samey in regard to adhering to that horrific aspect to it and the sort of deathly thing to it, in that a lot of these subclasses have various abilities that will trigger like frightening aspects, and you can frighten creatures and you can send them away from you, and repulsive aspects and necromancy, and as it makes sense within the big book of horrors. But aside from those sort of links where there's that familiar feel to it, all of these things feel very different, and there isn't anything that I read through that feels grossly overpowered or, oh my, this is the best subclass I've ever read. It just provides another option, and I like that it keeps within that theme. I mean, look at what this subclass visually might look like. It keeps within the theme of what the title of this book is, providing some horrific options. So it's really cool. The barbarian, the eldritch abomination, is kind of a mutating barbarian. And as you get, I'm reminded of kind of what's in Ravnica. I think it's the Simic Combine or something like that. As you get these mutations, they offer you various abilities and things that you can get from that. You've got the College of Dread Bard, where you sort of, how you go into the bardic aspect and you read stories and you tell tales? Here, you're telling ghost stories. You're trying to scare and frighten people. So this is really, really cool. The College of Dread Bard sounds really good as well. And you have this manipulation with different shadows that you can actually like teleport to and various things like that. So it's a very, very cool subclass. Cool picture as well. We have the Fear Domain Cleric. This is one that kind of screams that immediate, as I said, where this is one where you have kind of like, the turn undead concept. Imagine that. But you have something called Reign of Terror, where you basically present your holy symbol and you create like this fear that frightens everyone, within the area. It also has things where you get to now add, at 8th level, you get to add your wisdom modifier to the damage of any cantrips you cast. So this new cool ability called Potent Cantrips. Overall, though, I like the Fear Domain. It's really cool as well. There's a cool piece of artwork with it. The Circle of Midnight Druid. This guy kind of uses the idea that it understands roleplay-wise why, lionesses and various beasts might eat their young, and how I'm using sort of parasites and just how nature feeds off of itself. This uses a lot of the fallen, so dead things, to sort of harvest and siphon power from things going wrong, like here it says, at 6th level, you can channel the nature of parasites to siphon the life from creatures. When a creature you can see within 30 feet of you is hit by an attack, you can use your reaction to make the attack deal an additional 1d6 damage. Here you have another one called Savage Harvest at 2nd level, where whenever a creature is reduced to 0 hit points within 30 feet of you, while you're conscious, you gain a number of temporary hit points. So you're kind of taking off of a little bit of the darkness of things that happen within combat. So a really cool Circle of Midnight Druid as well. We have a really cool martial archetype called the Silhouette, the fighter here. Really neat in that already, like the essence of this, you have things called Shade Sight. Quiet as a shadow. At 3rd level, you get proficiency in the stealth skill. Shadow Mantle, this is sort of the main mechanic of him. You wear this sort of shadow-like robe. Like, I'm thinking, not McFarlane, but Spawn's cape, right? Where it's just this, it's not a Superman cape where it's just this thing hanging on off your back. It is this long sort of entity in and of itself. And from that, all these different abilities can trigger and whatnot, where, I mean, look at this one. While your Shadow Mantle is active, granted, we're talking level 15 here, you gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. You can have things where you can use a reaction to force a creature to roll with disadvantage. So it almost adds like a cloak of displacement aspect to it. So just really neat in the way that it kind of plays into the theme, and everything does that. You'll see that that's sort of the essence of everything here, is it's trying to keep things thematically within this horror dark element, a little bit shadowy and darkness, and playing off of death and necromancy and fear and fright and ghost stories. But the abilities fit within those themes as well. But as I said, they're not overly ridiculous in power where they feel like it's just too much or it's a must-have. You've got the Way of Thirsting Wings. Sorry, let me do that again. The Way of Thirsting Wings monk. Here, the essence of them is they're taking everything from like the vampire bat. So the ability to like change your perceptions and become better at certain things based on what you can hear, and so on and so forth, and like echolocation, and the fact that you gain blind sight and cool things like that. So really cool, and you can use key points to basically increase your walking speed and whatnot. And then you have like a moment where you can fly for like till the end of turn very quickly and kind of engage into combat, giving you advantage on that first attack. And you can give like right here, when you, this is level 17, of course, the aspect of the colony. So think of like I guess it's called the colony, a whole bunch of bats. When you use your aspect of thirst feature to regain hit points, that's one of the third level ones you can do. You can do this for allies as well. So really, really cool in that sort of vampiric but bat-like aspect to this new monk subclass. Really neat. The Paladin, I love this in that it has the Oath of the Lantern. This thing is all about the light and shining the light and the beacon. And it does a really good job of giving these tenets, which kind of, as paladins, often will be the case, they give you sort of the essence of what are my principles, what are the things and the tenets that I live by. And it does everything that deals with this sort of light, and you kind of bring a little bit of light to places that are otherwise dark. But there's also, just as this tenet says, just as the night always overtakes the day, evil can never be completely destroyed. To strive for that end is pointless. They're very realistic in that regard. They know that we are kind of climbing a mountain that can never truly be summited. It's like I'm willing to do everything I can and shed the light where it needs to be and fight against the darkness, but we're never going to truly eradicate it forever. And their essence and their flow and their abilities kind of fall within that. So it's really cool. I mean, the Saint of the Lost Cause is probably the best example, the culmination of everything about this Oath of the Lantern. At 20th level, so max, you have come to fully accept that the battle against darkness is ultimately without end, but still worth pursuing. That's everything that I was just talking about. Your current hit points and your hit point max increases by 20 plus your charisma modifier. Your hit point max can never be reduced. You can't be blinded, and you have advantage on all saving throws. So it's kind of like you just become this juggernaut, if you will. It's almost like the ultimate in a video game. You push that button and you become the ultimate, but yet you still have that realization of, I'm using this to do the best I can to try and push against the darkness, but I'm never going to truly win. So it's a really cool paladin. The Ranger has the Grave Warden. I love the theme of these guys, where it kind of, you sort of spend your time like scouring and scouting and sort of guarding over grave sites and places of mass burial and whatnot. So it's a really neat class thematically, and without going over them too much, a lot of the tactics and the actual moving parts on your character sheet all fit sort of within that vibe. The Rogue here is the Crypt Delver. This is something that, whether you're looking at fully, Halloween inspired horror game or not, if your group is dungeon delving, which can be in very high, high fantasy, very bright, benevolent, really good aligned campaigns. I mean, you can still have an old school dungeon delve. This guy's really good at that, just because he's really good at getting advantage on basically dealing with traps and dealing with locks and picking locks and whatnot. I like that at third level, your situational awareness is improved so much that just at third level, your passive perception is increased by 2. I like that it's playing with passive. That's something that I don't see very often, and it's pretty neat, because it kind of is one of those where the DM can kind of throw this rogue, this Crypt Delver, a bone, so to speak, without having to bog anything down with any extra rolls. So it's just kind of an extra thing that you just have just by being you. So that's really kind of cool. And then, of course, you have different things that you can manipulate off of your sneak attack, where if you successfully damage them with your sneak attack at 9th level, they can't take any reactions till the start of your next turn. So really cool in the rogue aspect. And that's the first one that I'll mention, which is a big selling point for all the content here. It's clear that you can use a lot of these things, especially this one was kind of the first that I was really reminded of that. This content works even outside of a very horror element or, dark, sinister, macabre, very deathly focused game. This works anywhere that you have dungeons and things with traps and locks that need to be picked. So you've got some content here that really, and I think that's a testament to how well they've done, Cody and PB Publishing in creating content that feels kind of, again, sideways or more horizontal in power. So it's providing more options, but it's not literally a linear thing where this is better than the other thing or this is worse than another. It's not designing with that thought process in mind. And as a result, it's just creating more and more options that I might be able to pick and choose and sort of, if these were ingredients, I can pick and choose which ones I want and throw them into the stew pot of whatever my campaign may be. So a lot of this stuff fits outside of even what's intended. So really cool, and that's a very huge plus. We have the Sorcerer. This origin point here is so inspiring to me as a Dungeon Master. This goes beyond how I look at it from a player point of view, being that it's a subclass for a character, right, for a PC. The origin here is based on the lycanthrope and lycanthropy, and everything fits within that. I'm not going to belabor this guy too much and talk too much about it. It's just really well done. This has just oozes with a sort of ambiance and theme, and then everything kind of tacks on, of course. You're immune to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from weapons that are not magical and not silvered, and then you can grow sharp claws and teeth and whatnot. So really, really cool that you can spend 7 of your sorcery points at 18th level to basically become a werewolf. So really cool that this tacked it on as a subclass. That's a really neat thing. The Coven, the otherworldly patron. It's cool that this thing ties into taking powers from the hag-like aspects of it. And you've got abilities called Crone's Aegis and Hag's Bargain and whatnot. And you have this ability that's sort of your baseline at first level called Jinx, where you basically can almost silence something, right? Think of hag magic, where you can steal the voice of a creature and they're unable to speak and whatnot. But then later on, you can imitate that voice. So it has some cool roleplay mechanics here within this. But then, of course, you've got various abilities and stuff. And then it even goes into some horror-themed Eldritch invocations that you can now have some moving parts that work within combat as well. So, and a cool piece of artwork to accompany sort of the essence of what this might be about. So really well done in that regard. You've got this new arcane tradition called blood magic. So just, again, fitting within the practice of that. And I've read many things in the past and other role-playing games as well about using blood and that sort of grisly aspect of things to fuel the source of your arcane power. So really cool in that regard, a really cool wizard there. I'm not going to go over the backgrounds too much. There's just the abductee, which is basically taking from, you were kidnapped and brought to the Fae, and you've been brought back. So imagine it, think of it from alien abduction and what powers might you get from that. But again, we're looking at things from a background point of view. So there's not a lot of big game-breaking things here mechanically, but just a lot of flavor and story. So you have the abductee, you have the cured lycanthrope, so you once were. There's just a lot here. Here is where we're looking at stuff that fuels the creativity from a dungeon master point of view. You have a grave robber. You have a horror survivor. So you've seen something, just you came out of this with whether it's PTSD or the scars of that, and you now sort of exist, and here's the various languages and equipment and skill proficiencies and personality traits and such that go along with that. Liberated thrall. You've got the paranormal investigator. You have the resurrected. You have the sexton, which is repairing churches and things like that, but being among that religious group for so long. Here, you also have the way to sort of take, there's a lot of backgrounds that come from their other book, which is a cool little marketing thing of saying, hey, here's a bunch more backgrounds in our other book, but here's ways that you can kind of put a twist on some of those from some existing things, but some of them are, like the cultist. That's from regular Player's Handbook, I believe. And it gives you sort of a way of sort of one little paragraph of how to twist it and add a horror and, dark element to it all. So really cool that it gives you some ways to manipulate some existing stuff and their own content. This, towards the back of the book, is a pleasant surprise and just ramps up content to another level. you have a bunch of pre-generated characters. As I said in the very beginning of the video, there's a lot here in options and whatnot, but if you don't want to go through the legwork of making your own character, there's a bunch of pre-generated things here. And notice that when we talk about these characters, it has an entire half a page of story and background. This is the epitome of NPC design done for me. I can read and I can say, I've got this Crushed Grimoire and I've got this Ezekiel Schneed, and I want to use these as NPCs. There's enough story here that I can wrangle in some details as to how they might interact with the PCs. And it does that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 pre-generated characters here that have story, but that's the behind the scenes, right? This is for like the social and the exploration aspect of the pillar of gameplay. Now, if I move forward, we've got them laid out in actual character sheet format, so I can see their stats if I need to use them mechanically in combat or as NPCs that fight alongside or whatever it may be. And here's where I talked about, look at this character sheet. It just has, of course, screams the big Book of Horrors vibe to the aesthetic of it all. I mean, you've got this pentagram here and all this stuff, and your stats fall within that, and you've got these little broken stone blocks, and the sheet looks well laid out, and it's well designed, and these apply to every one of the things, or every one of the NPCs I just talked about, where it says right here, see beginning of Appendix A for his backstory. And it does this for every single one. And then at the very back, it gives us just a bunch of blank sheet. So as I said, if you want to create some new characters that maybe aren't even in a horror-themed game or Cursed Strahd, just for whatever your world might be, you have that subclass rogue that I said fits. As long as you're a dungeon delver in any campaign, that new crypt dweller, whatever he's called, rogue fits. But here's a cool character sheet that's just extra, and there's just, there it is. It has the sheet that has your spells and your character appearance. It's giving you the same good bits, but some designer here, and from a designer's point of view, this is laid out well. Like someone, this wasn't just slapped on, like someone knew what they were doing here, and it's just really cool that it gives us that extra bit. So, as I said, I'll put the links to this in the description as far as where to find it all. You're going to get a watermarked PDF, but folks, you're going to get this 78 pages, everything I just went over, for $5. So are we looking at, as I talk about in content all the time, it definitely screams to the theme and the vibe and the essence that they were going for. It fits if you are, as the front cover says very, very quickly, if you want some horrific player options and something within that horror-themed, Halloween-inspired, one-shot campaign or adventure, I should say, or you're playing in a Cursed Strahd, these options fit. But there's so many little moving parts and points that seem well balanced, that provide some cool options and some cool ideas. Like I said, that rogue that looks like that fits in many, many campaigns in different worlds and different styles of games, as does the idea that you're giving him like a boost to passive perception. There's little bits here, that content that fits everywhere. And because of that, can this be used at sort of all tables? I think there's enough options here that you can pick and choose from, and any sort of savvy DM that's willing to just look and think outside the box and look for options, if you have even the smallest element of darkness and necromancy and horror and fright within your world, there's no reason why you can't give the ambiance in a very bright, high fantasy, happy-go-lucky world. If you want to present a little town or a village where it's a little darker, and it's just, there's something wrong here, and your PCs are going there to investigate, it makes sense that when they go to the tavern, the bard that's at the front entertaining the clientele and the patrons is the bard that's within this book, and the tales he tells are ghost story based, and the various mechanical things. Like, you could see how that content easily works anywhere. So because of that, I've got to give this thing a perfect 5 out of 5 for content, just simply for the fact of how much you get fuel for creativity and how many things might actually be usable at your table for the DM and especially for the PCs. So Cody, Faulk, PB Publishing, I am excited about what you've done here. Very, very well done. I'm definitely going to be taking a look at, whether I do a review or not, I'm going to be taking a look at the big book of backgrounds, and I'm kind of sold on the overall vibe of what you're doing here. So very well done. This, folks, is my final score. I hope this review helped. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and take care.